Welcome back to Venture Onward. Today I plan to talk Rebel Moon and how it's aiming to be a huge competitor to Star Wars. While Star Wars is a tremendous franchise, it has yielded some of its pop culture stock over the previous decade. Whereas any new release utilized to be a global event, the point that new TV shows now come on regularly to Disney Plus has decreased its pizzazz since getting more steam. As far as films go, the current statement that both Patty Jenkins and Kevin Feige's Star Wars undertakings have been postponed causes it to be evident that the fate of this cinematic universe isn't heading to skim further the past anytime momentarily, especially since, at this moment, apparently every release is placed in one prequel time or another. The last time Star Wars felt like it counted was with the 2017 sequel, The Last Jedi. While the movie notoriously split the audience, it even brought large swings and was obliged to dispatch a Force lightning strike glowing through the set corpus. Unfortunately, the stated backlash directed Disney to get a considerably more secure system with the trilogy finishing The Rise of Skywalker, a movie that untied just almost everything that Rian Johnson's daring film performed. Since then, the franchise has included highlights, The Mandalorian, and Andor, for instance, but even these are restricted by what's functioned before. However, Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon, which started as a Star Wars undertaking, has appeared as a compelling, unique universe where anything is achievable. Not restrained by nearly 5 decades of canon and a particular fanbase that doesn't know what it likes, the Netflix space opera is unrestricted to soar via hyperspace to whatever goal it desires, and that's moving to create this non-Star Wars film into the most thrilling Star Wars-like a project of the decade. Pulling motivation from the classic innovations of Akira Kurosawa and George Lucas' revered science fiction franchise, Rebel Moon will be released on Netflix on December 22, 2023. The spirit and visuals are refined space opera, and while story elements are tiniest at this moment, what is known is that the movie will star Sophia Boutella as Cora, a woman with cryptic roots who must travel the cosmos to grow a brigade competent of carrying on the dictatorial forces that terrorize them all. The movie features a piled cast, including Jimin-Hoon Soo, Ray Fisher, Jenna Malone, Charlie Hunnam, Cary Elwes, and Anthony Hopkins. On paper, the nearest Star Wars comparison with Rebel Moon would presumably be Rogue One. Both films pursue an affiliation of combatants joined by their purpose to prevent the encroaching militaries of a burgeoning galactic empire. However, while even the elevated storytelling assumption of Rogue One was restrained by its links to the original Star Wars trilogy, Rebel Moon can utilize this comprehensive jumping-off moment to go rather considerably anywhere it likes. That is what Zack Snyder is expecting. The filmmaker has stated he expects Rebel Moon undertakes its franchise that can be persisted and developed upon. Also, after 2 great victories like the Snyder Cut of Justice League and his successful hit zombie movie, Army of the Dead, it's never been a more suitable time for the director to handle such a giant swing. Snyder initially conceived Rebel Moon as a mainline Star Wars undertaking. Lucasfilm recanted it in the 2010s, but ironically, failing the Star Wars luggage will let Snyder's narrative take opportunities and have an impact. Star Wars: The Last Jedi was a massive box office sensation. It was well received by analysts. It responded to complaints about The Force Awakens by lessening anticipations and grabbing opportunities with every story tempo. And because of the movie's courage, it divided audiences like a lightsaber to a stem. While numerous relished the incredible story curves it started and the film's epic hierarchy, others left its gloomy riff on traditional characters like Luke Skywalker portrayed by Mark Hamill. However, of what flank of this range you're on, nearly everyone can consent that the endeavor at course correction we witnessed in the unsavory The Rise of Skywalker was more inadequate. Over a half-decade after, we have yet to attend anything about the alleged trilogy of Star Wars movies scheduled by Last Jedi director Rian Johnson. By now, Star Wars is attached in a rut. While moments of brilliance like Andor sometimes brighten the course, most franchise lovers can agree that the Star Wars franchise requires bold new visions to flee from the limitations of its tight 75-year timeline. Unfortunately, the only roads where that appears feasible are in comics, books, or video games, the ones that simple Star Wars lovers of the franchise pursue the least. Meanwhile, Rian Johnson resumes making compelling and innovative new genre movies like Glass Onion. If Snyder's original Rebel Moon designs had taken hold, he probably would have met the same forceful answer as The Last Jedi. By isolating it from the franchise, Rebel Moon will be able to reveal new narratives, devalue anticipations, and shock audiences without generating the same kind of trouble. The most significant concern with the recent slate of Star Wars undertakings is that every single one should be somehow connected into or take position between the confines of the three major film trilogies. Every major Star Wars project right now fills in the empty spaces of movies or television performances reached earlier, with no undertaking daring to glance at what occurs after the conclusion of The Rise of Skywalker. One factor that indicates how broadly this propels the franchise to spin its wheels is the continuous retrieval of deceased heritage characters like Obi-Wan Kenobi, portrayed by Ewan McGregor, and Cassian Andor, performed by Diego Luna. After the significant shakeup that The Last Jedi did to the audience, Disney seems fearful of veering from the conventional procedure of its thriving TV offerings. Meanwhile, these television series and films are incapable or reluctant to make bold alternatives, but they must be cemented between significant junctures in the canon or placed far adequately away from the prominent battles to be seen as inconsequential in the grand plan. It is why, analogized to the recent slate of recent and forthcoming Star Wars undertakings, Rebel Moon is infinitely more compelling to expect. While the galaxy far, far away may be satisfied to turn in spirals, retreading the history, Zack Snyder's freshly coined franchise is loaded with constant possibility. Just as Rebel Moon is a new look on Snyder's initial Star Wars pitch, maybe the filmmaker's new cosmos can even be a residence for further axed Star Wars undertakings. While Patty Jenkins' sequel to the monumental DC hit, Wonder Woman, didn't precisely live up to the promotion of its precursor, it's evident from her jaw-dropping actions with the actual crime serial killer drama Monster, which she wrote and directed as well as the actual smash hit, Wonder Woman, that the filmmaker is qualified of accomplishing extraordinary things. Meanwhile, Kevin Feige is widely comprehended as the man behind arguably the most prominent franchise on the Earth, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. These innovators glimpsed their Star Wars undertakings dumped to the curb. Nevertheless, let's state that Snyder's Rebel Moon is a tremendous triumph, unlocking the gates to spin-offs galore. In this theoretical cosmos, features from the Feige undertaking, the Jenkins one, or any other revoked Star Wars undertaking could be retooled and restored in the Rebel Moon franchise. Netflix is gambling large on Snyder. And with consistent tepid releases like the Russo brothers' $200 million espionage nail-biter The Gray Man garnering follow UPS from Netflix, it appears possible that Snyder's unique cosmos will be offered an opportunity to expand. And for lovers of space operas, there's no inquiry that a throng of Rebel Moon undertakings is far more stimulating than the groove the Star Wars franchise has brought itself into. Also, in the pipeline of Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon is getting a ridiculous scale video game adaptation. Zack Snyder stated he's toiling around on a video game adaptation of his forthcoming sci-fi film Rebel Moon, featuring RPG components while puffing a ridiculous scale. I mean, the one thing that I'm really having a really good time with is, and I don't even know if I'm supposed to talk about it, this RPG that we're doing that is just literally insane, and so immersive, and so intense, and so huge, and like, we talked about how we would do the game and I was like, we just said let's go, stated Snyder during an appearance on the Nerd Queens podcast. It is far from an official statement, with no other particulars about the game standing established outside Snyder's words. No developer or publisher is linked or has a release window or platform verified. However, Snyder has high expectations for a game adaptation. They were like, we can do it at this scale, or we can do it at like, ridiculous scale, stated the Justice League director. I was like, well, ridiculous scale is clearly the scale that we're doing it at. And they were like, well, it's gonna take so much time because we've gotta do all these brain dumps, you've gotta tell us everything in the universe, and I was like, that's fine, happy to do it, let's go all the way. Snyder also stated that expanding Rebel Moon was not a small time commitment, and that the interconnected fiction world took a lot of attention to make it all make sense. Rebel Moon was initially pitched to Lucasfilm as a Star Wars film set after Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. After Lucasfilm shifted the idea down, Snyder resumed creating it as a homegrown sci-fi cosmos. In July 2021, it was announced that Rebel Moon would be a Netflix exclusive, which, starring the Mummy's Sofia Boutella, would track the residents of an amicable settlement under danger from the militaries of the tyrant Belisarius. As for when an official video game is still up in the air, Snyder did talk about a forthcoming statement earlier this month. However, it is probably connected to a DC project as the message was transmitted from Justice League Bad Darkseid. Rebel Moon is set to arrive on Netflix on December 22nd. Well, that's about it. Thank you for listening. Until next time, venture onward.